By lamplight, you count them the same way you count anything you can't bear to look at, fast and by the edges. 12 cots in a brick row house built for ordinary life, for families in front parlors. 12 shapes under thin sheeting, and the sound the room makes altogether is water. The retch and the trickle and the drip of bodies wringing themselves dry into buckets you empty, and you can never empty enough. You know the disease by its colors now. You know how a man goes into it flushed and frightened and comes out on the far side of a single night gone slate and gray, the blue creeping into the lips and the beds of the nails, the eyes sinking back into the skull, the fingers puckering like something left too long in the wash. You know the cramps take them in the legs and the belly and fold them over. And you know the cruelest part, that most of them stay clear-headed nearly to the end. They know you. They ask for the water you give them and cannot keep. They ask for their mothers. Some of them ask you plainly whether they are going to die, and you have learned to answer with your hands and not your mouth, because your mouth has stopped being able to lie. It is past midnight in the brick row at 211 Main Street behind me, and you were the only one who stayed. How you came to be standing here, how any of this came into Milford at all, starts a long way south of you, and a long way back. To understand the summer of 1849, you have to follow the river. The thing that is emptying those bodies in that room came up out of the delta, the way everything comes up in those years, on a boat. It was old, this pestilence, and for most of its life it had kept to Asia and left the rest of the world alone. But the new age of steam had taught it to travel, and travel it did, out of the ports and up the Mississippi, barge by barge, landing by landing, into the great artery of the continent. It reached the Queen City as a kind of terrible gift on Christmas Day of 1848. A steamboat up from New Orleans tied at the Cincinnati levee, and they carried a dying man off of their deck. The city's board and health looked at the single body and announced there was no cause for alarm. They were wrong, in a way that is hard now to fathom. When the disease broke fully the next summer, Cincinnati buried more of its people than New York did, more than London. 1 in every 25 souls in the city gone. 10,000 more simply ran, packed into every wagon and cart and carriage they could lay hands on, and fled the city in a long exhale of panic, carrying with them, though they did not know it, the very thing they were running from. And here's what should chill you standing here now. They did not know what it was. They believed it rode in on bad air, a miasma, a foulness you could smell, and they burned tar and sulfur in the street to drive it off. They blamed the weather, they blamed the fruit, and they blamed their drink. And most of all, God forgave them, they blamed the dead. It was the intemperate who died. The papers assured their comfortable readers, the dirty, the German and the Irish and the poor, people whose habits have marked them out, as though the sickness were a judgment, and clean living a thing you could buy your way to safety with. A professor stood before a hall at Miami University in Oxford and called it God's scourge upon a sinful nation. It would be 5 more summers before a doctor in London proved the truth, that the killer was in the water, in the wells and in the buckets, in the cool drink you gave a feverish child. And by then this summer would be long over, and your dead would be long in the ground. What the doctors had to offer in the meantime was worse than nothing. They dosed the dying with calomel, mercury, by the spoonful, and with opium and brandy. And when the cramps came, they laid hot bricks against the cold blue skin. None of it touched the thing that was killing them. That was the shape of the thing as it spread out from Cincinnati that summer, radiating along every road and rail and river out of the city, into the valley towns, one landing at a time, coming north, coming up a little Miami, coming, though no one in Milford yet said it out loud, for you. You're not a nurse. There was no such thing. Not really, not for a woman. Not then. No training, no diploma, no corps to belong to. What there was you. A wife on a Milford side street, keeper of a house and garden, the woman who neighbors sent for when fever wouldn't break, or a birth ran long, or someone had to sit up through the last night with the dying, and after wash the body and dress it for the ground. It was the oldest work there is, and you had done it since you were a girl, and you had met this particular disease before. 17 years back, when it first came through the valley, it had reached into your own home and taken what it wanted to take, and you had learned its face then, the blue, the cold, the terrible clear eyes. So when the word began coming up the river that summer, you understood sooner than most exactly what was on its way. You could have run like the others. You had already looked this thing in the eye once and lived. Instead, when it came, you rolled your sleeves up and met it head on. The news arrived, a death down in Cincinnati, a cousin's letter, a traveler who'd seen the wagon streaming out. Then a death closer, then a name you knew, and then Milford began to empty. You watched the town you had lived your whole life inside fold up around you. Shutters drawn in daylight, the Methodist church, your church, just blocks from you, half full, and then a quarter full. Shops shut with no notice. The well-to-do loading their carriages and making for high ground and cleaner air, the way Cincinnatians had, carrying their fear out with them. The dust of Main Street, that had never once in living memory gone quiet on a summer evening, went quiet. And into that quiet the disease walked, and set about doing in a village of a few hundred what it had done in a city of 100,000, which was to kill, and keep killing, until by the time the summer loosened its grip, 48 of your neighbors were in the ground. 48, in a town you could have fit inside 2 big churches. They needed somewhere to put the sick, and John Kugler, the man whose name was on half of Milford, the mills, the stone warehouses, and the brick row itself, the richest man in the county, gave over one of his row houses on Main Street for it. Number 211, the house you're standing in front of now. And here the record goes quiet and leaves you to wonder, because no one wrote down why. It may have been mercy, plain and open-handed, a rich man doing what a rich man could for the town that had made him. That is one reading. It may be the true one, but there is another, and you would be a fool not to feel it in the brick. This was a disease that took the poor first. Everyone said so, even as they said it wrongly. The comfortable told themselves clean living would spare them. It was the laborer, the newcomer, the family down on the low ground by the river who filled the cots. And a hospital in a summer like this one is also simply a place to put people, a place to gather the dying up off the streets and out of the good front rooms and away from the eyes of the ones who still had carriages to flee in, a place to set the diseased poor behind a single set of walls so the town would not have to watch them go. Mercy and quarantine wear the same face. A refuge for the sick and a place to hide the sick from view can be in the ledger, the very same building. Which was it? The record does not say. Maybe it was never only one thing. What you know is the brick and the 12 cots, and that someone had to come in through that door and stay. That someone was you. So the thing that began 2,000 miles downriver, traveled by boat, made landfall on a Christmas morning, has come the whole long way to this. A lamplit room in a row house on Main Street, 12 people wringing themselves dry, and you moving among them with your bucket and your useless brandy. And you can feel it closing. That is the thing no one tells you about a summer like this, how small the world gets. It started as a rumor thousands of miles off, and it has narrowed and narrowed up the Mississippi to the Ohio, up the Ohio to the Little Miami, up the Little Miami to Milford, up Main Street to this row, through this door to this room. And now tonight it narrows once more to a single cot at the end of the line, where a girl no older than 9 has just gone quiet, to the width of one breath, and then no breath. The cooling of one small hand inside your own. You lay the hand down and close the eyes of the frail girl. You take up the lamp and carry it to the next cot, because the next cot is where you're needed now, and the night is nowhere near done. Outside, the wagon rolls and stops at the door to collect the daily dead. This was the story of the 1849 cholera epidemic that hit Milford, and the house that was turned into a hospital to care for the dying.